Okay, we are live with Truth, Family, Culture, and Health with Ruben George.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, people all over the world, and really happy to be here with my really good, beloved brother, friend, Derek Nipinak. And of course, I work for Tsleil-Waututh Nation Sacred Trust. With me tonight also is Peter McCarthy from the Wilderness Committee. They've been our Tsleil-Waututh's longest allies. They've been working with us from the very beginning for 11 years now. And from Sacred Ecology, we have the beautiful Christine Peterson, who's down in Portland, Oregon. She's going to be doing the tech work for us, so she'll be popping in and out and making sure everything's going well. You know, now that we're going live, we're going to take she's going to take some of the links and connect them to other websites and other Facebooks, and we're going to try to broadcast this out. So it's a hot 29 degrees here right now in Vancouver, which is a bit of a shock because it was like 10 degrees like not even 5 days ago. So we're dealing with the heat, and we love it, and I'm not complaining. And so yeah, it's a beautiful day here, and I'm happy to be here. But you know what I'm going to do right now? I'm going to hand it over to you, Peter, and see if there's some updates in the environmental world with Trans Mountain or any of our allies that we stand in solidarity with, and them saving the lands, water, and people.
Yeah, definitely. So the news from the environmental world, at least anyway, this week, there's obviously Fairy Creek blockades have been going on for months now, but really heated up. And this Saturday, a crowd of 2,000 people came to the Fairy Creek blockade and walked past the police line and reestablished a camp that had been set up there at the waterfall. And Ruben, you were there. Can you tell us a bit about the experience?
Yeah, it was really beautiful. I'm going to show you a big picture of something of what they're going to be protecting. You know, my son and I'm 6'2". He's 6'4", and we're walking under one of the trees that was blown over, and that's that's huge. It's massive, but that's what they're protecting. And you know, not many know this, but some of the nations there were supporting us years ago when we were standing up against the Kinder Morgan pipeline before Canada took over and called it Trans Mountain. So we're happy to go back there and to share in solidarity with the people there. And it was amazing. You know, I didn't expect our family would do so much work. My son came over, Will George, my cousin came over, my sister Charlene Alec. You know, we went and Olivia came, and we did some really good work. Right away they set up events, and we just went over for solidarity, not expecting anything, but they had us do workshops in every one of their camps. It started the major headquarters camp, and we had to leave 7 a.m. to make sure that we got there before the police roadblock came up. And luckily they didn't have the roadblock that was preventing people from getting to at least the headquarters camp. So we got there, talked to everybody just a little bit, and some of the organizers. Then we went up to that picture that I showed to one of the camps, and they showed us what they're protecting and what they're doing. Then we came down and we did like I guess a rally. All my family spoke, and then a couple others spoke after us, and we had about 400 people at that point. But the first camp we went to was smaller. There's like 50 people. And then the waterfall, what you mentioned, you know, they wouldn't let us through. They had a police roadblock there, and actually some of the police that were also on Burnaby Mountain, and they're asking me for help, and I was like, dude, you know, I want to go up there myself. I can't stop. I said let us go up there. And then they said, how about we drive you up there? And I was like, that'd be pretty weird. So we we said, we're going to go in a van. And they said, what van? And I said, never mind. Because one of the vans was on the other side. And they're going, what van? Where's the van? We want to know where this van is. And I was like, never mind. And I walked away and I said, we should go right now at this moment, because they were concerned about the van that got across on this side of the police block. And so we jumped in the van. And it was funny because there's like 10 of us in this little van. We're just crowded, but we made it up there. And we got to share some words again and take some pictures. And then we came down and spoke another group with the youth that are having a sacred fire there. And they're doing beautiful things, a bunch of Indigenous youth that are really holding that fire and keeping things in a prayerful way. And everybody's pretty cool there. They're pretty cool there. And then I don't know how they talked me into it, because usually I don't do interviews with Global News. And, because usually they're, 11 years stopping this damn pipeline. They did one good interview with me, one. And so I didn't have time to think about it. The leadership said, please. And I said, no, it should be you, the local. No, said, no, we want you. And I said, oh, geez, couldn't say no to elders. Then I thought about it. I said, no, I would have said no, but I ended up doing it. It turned out people told me it was a good story. So then we went back to headquarters again, and they had asked us to do another rally sort of type gathering, and we spoke again. And we got there like 8 in the morning, and we didn't get home till 11 at night. And it was a pretty busy time. And it was a lot of really, really good people that were there. And of course, I did the tie-in, and I jump into that with Derek about, the 215 missing kids and how I tied that in. I'll explain that later. And not missing, the 215 kids that were found in the grave, not missing. I mean, I guess they were missing because they didn't document. They only documented 50 of them out of the 215 that were. But we'll get into that, and we'll talk about that. But how about that, Peter? Is there any other updates?
Yeah, the only other thing I wanted to add, there was a prayer circle yesterday on the Trans Mountain Pipeline route, right at Brunette Ave, where near Braid Station in New Westminster. And so, interfaith folks from like Quakers and Buddhists and Christian faiths sat and encircled what do you call them? With the boom, construction equipment, and held off Trans Mountain all day. They weren't able to do the construction. Right, it's right in a riparian zone for the Brunette River, and so just tearing apart really vital wetland habitat. And so yeah, they managed to hold them off all day. And apparently, the company, if they don't get this work done in the next 10 days, has to reapply for the permits for it. And so that's why folks were out there. And that'll be a place to watch over the next week and a half or so, as I imagine there'll be folks that are out there again.
And so the next 10 days, as the manager of Tsleil-Waututh Nation and looking at we're going to court, I can't encourage people to go there, but you heard Peter say within the next 10 days, if people stall it, they have to apply for another permit, and that will stall it even longer. So that's great that those people did that. Hey, can you tell me about the blockade of the dog walkers? I like that story.
Oh yeah, so they up at the tank farm, some local residents, you can't block construction equipment from getting into the tank farm. Or you can, but you'd be violating the injunction. But you're not violating the injunction just by crossing the road. People cross the road there all the time. It's a public trail. There's dog walkers that cross by there every day. So a handful of Burnaby residents were slowing them down just by crossing the road sort of at staggered opportunities. And managed to hold up their trucks and create some troubles for them as they needed to get in and out of the facility. So folks are folks are finding really creative ways to fight this in every possible way you can imagine. So yeah, it's a good one.
And I heard somebody, I don't know who did it, but accidentally spilt some dog food on the road, and the dogs wouldn't leave until, of course, they cleaned up their mess and further prevented the trucks from going through.
I hadn't even heard about that. That's genius. Way to go.
It's an accident. Yeah, you know what? Just thinking of Fairy Creek, people were relatively safe, masks and keeping their distance, and makes me think of the Trans Mountain and the work that we do with the rallies and the marches and bringing awareness. I think it's getting close to that time that we have to start organizing to do something. And of course, with COVID, we have the utmost safety in mind of everybody, unlike the Trans Mountain people who continue to work. Anything else, Peter?
No, that covered it for me. Oh, the other thing I should mention is the Fraser River water ceremony. Cookbee, Judy Wilson, and some Indigenous folks from all along the Fraser River met at Colony Farm this past Saturday, Regional Park, and had a beautiful water ceremony there where Trans Mountain wants to drill underneath the Fraser River and is sort of gearing up to do that. And that river supports salmon all the way from here, all up through the Fraser Canyon and Caribou Plateau, and right up into the headwaters up near Valemount, where it crosses again in Secwepemc territory. And so it's the most important salmon river in the world, and to see a pipeline spill anywhere along it would be just absolutely devastating. So that's construction that it's starting up again. Metro Vancouver halted it for a couple of weeks, but that's another place that people are really interested in watching. And of course that event was really strong in spiritual grounding as well. So I think people are ready to come out of our COVID hovels and fight like hell for the future of the planet.
Where was that?
At Colony Farm Regional Park in Coquitlam, where Trans Mountain's drilling into the Fraser.
And any updates on any of the court cases?
Court cases, I know that the Manuel family, several of Kanahus and her sisters were in court this past week because of charges related to Trans Mountain and a meeting that they shut down a while back, and some activity at the Blue River drilling station. I did hear how it went, but I can't remember off the top of my head. I don't want to make things up, but it sounds like they'll be back in court again soon.
What about Miranda Dick and their group? Do you know anything about that? When they're
part
of that group?
I haven't been able to keep as good an eye on them. I think I know they were in court at some point recently, but I just haven't followed it well enough.
Okay. I think some of those are not coming up until August. That's why we're not too. August is one Miranda's group, I believe, and then September is Will George is going September 9th. He's going to trial, and so we'll keep people updated on that. I was just throwing. But yeah, awesome. Is that it?
Yeah, that's all I had to talk about.
And Peter, I know you have other commitments tonight, so I know you'll be checking out. But thank you very much for those updates, and yeah, that's good. Christine, I hand it over to you.
Hey, thanks, Ruben. My name's Christine Peterson. I'm the director and founder of Sacred Ecology. which is a documentary film project, production company, and online publication about the importance of cultural and biodiversity preservation. We believe that preserving traditional cultures, indigenous rights, sacred sites, and practicing regenerative organic agriculture is essential for the biodiversity preservation of plant and animal species and ultimately for sustaining all life on Earth. We have teamed up with Reuben George to feature this live stream series called Truth, Family, Culture, and Health, which is the foundation of Coast Salish law. Reuben George is the Sacred Trust Manager of Tsleil-Waututh First Nation. He's an environmental activist, spiritual leader, Sundance Chief, and the grandson of Chief Dan George. He has spent the last decade educating his neighbors in Coast Salish territory about environmental issues and leading the fight against the Trans Mountain Pipeline in Canada. Today, our special guest is Derek Nepinak, who served as AMC Grand Chief from 2011 to 2017. He's the former chief of the Pine Creek First Nation and former chairman of the West Region Tribal Council. Nepinak has built a reputation as a strong leader, negotiator, and has an educational background in law, policy, history, and art. His advocacy approach is built on understandings of inherent treaty rights as the foundation for relationship building and reconciliation with Canada. Welcome, Derek.
Thank you. Awesome. Awesome. Thank you,
Thank
Brother
you.
Derek. Really happy that you're here to join us. We had a discussion with our team, and I had a discussion with my brother Derek about this show. And normally what we do is we, I ask questions about Derek and why he does what he does, and why he's a protector of our lands, waters, and people, and then we go from there into Derek's work and all the great things that he have done. But we're going to change it up tonight, because I think we want to talk about the 215 little babies and children that were found in a mass grave in Kamloops Indian Residential School. It's such a travesty, and those are things of stories that I already heard. And now it's fact, and what they documented was 50 kids died, and so those are the documented ones. Now additionally, there's the 215. So and some as young as 3 years old, and I think this is a good time for education on Canada, on what has happened, and being at the memorial today for about an hour, and in Vancouver and on Robson Street, and hundreds of people were stopping by. They have 215 shoes on the steps of the art gallery, and that's one of the busier streets that people walk through in Vancouver. And a lot of tears were shed by people who care, who thought that Canada was a really good place and treated First Nations really well. But the colonial mindset that they created then, in some ways, is still happening today. And I think those are some of the things that we're going to get into, because it's not just coincidence because First Nations are bad that the 40% of the jail population is full of First Nations. It's because things are still wrong. It's still racist. My cousin stole things. That's called break and enter, and he did 30 years in jail for that. The truth is, a non-native would get nothing for killing a First Nation, and less than 5 years, or 5 years for killing somebody, or the homeless. My family's done tons and tons of healing. Where I'm proud to say that all my moms, all her grandkids, all of them are cultural and spiritual. Almost all of them are drug and alcohol free. And that's the same as Tsleil-Waututh. And we did tons and tons of healing around that. But some of our family didn't make it. Like my dad, he died down in Maine and Hastings. My brother lives down there. And I know for a fact, if colonization didn't happen, if these residential schools didn't happen, my dad would have been alive, and my brother would be okay. Because if we think of the show that we have, and this is why we're having Derek on, it's truth, family, health, and culture. How as a human being do we live with truth? The truth of goodness, the truth of spirit, the truth, those trees that the people are protected in Fairy Creek, those carry a spirit. That's the truth for us. That's the truth that everybody has a spirit. The truth of goodness, that's what we're talking about. Truth of health. The health of those trees, the health of us as individuals, the health of our families. Family. The health, the truth, health, family. Family is so important. So important. Our parents are so important. Our ancestors before us are so important. The next 7 generations, the last 7 generations, we talk about as those being the teachings, but that's our own family. And not just our Indigenous family, everybody's family. And we teach that with non-Indigenous people come into our ceremonies. We say, when you offer us tobacco, that's for your ancestors. It's not paying your ticket with tobacco to come into a ceremony. It's so that you could pray to your ancestors who know you the best, so we could call them in with that tobacco. Family, everybody's family, and culture. All those wonderful things of our culture, of our ceremonies. You know, we have ceremonial masks, ceremonial dances, ceremonial songs, ceremony healing, ceremonial mourning. We have birth ceremonies, we have death ceremonies. That's our culture. Our culture of living a good life and to incorporate ceremony into it. That's how we live. Then you add all the fundamentals of humanity to these things of love, honor, respect, dignity, pride, compassion, truth, knowledge, wisdom. Those are the fundamentals of humanity that we apply to these teachings. So for a fact, I know that we would think of I think of my dad, if he was raised that way, not influenced by the residential school or day schools. Same with my brother who went to residential school, my older brother who's not doing well. They'd have a different life. That's a fact. But Canada did this, and the church did this, and get this, the Catholic Church is the only church in Canada here that did this to First Nations that has not apologized. The Pope is refusing to apologize, but guess what? This is what I believe. It's beyond apology. It's beyond. They have to pay. And it's a sad thing, the facts that have happened. And you know, I warn the listeners, because maybe we'll talk about some of that. But my mom is only very few elders that are able to talk about the starvation that she's went through and witnessed, the physical and sexual abuse that she went through of being beaten as a little child and being molested as a little child, the murders that she witnessed of little children. My mom could speak on that. And most can't. They really can't. And get this, I told you a tragic story of my brother and my dad and my mom, but it's the same story for all of our Indigenous people right across this country of Canada for 150 years. The last residential school closed in 1996. And so now when you look at a homeless person, that's somebody who suffered. My own brother said, for the life that we had is too hard for me to heal. It's too hard for me to heal. And I can't be sober like you, but I'm proud of you, he says. You know, he's okay sharing this story. He wanted a documentary on this so people could learn and be educated on the ugly truth of colonization that still happened, and it's still continuing. It's still continuing. And Derek, my brother, I know you work hard to change that. And I know you incorporate the cultural and spiritual values of your ceremonies into this. I'm so happy when we're together, we always have a chance to pray. Whenever we're in each other's presence, we make sure we get a chance to pray. And I thank you for coming here and being a part of this. And you know, I you know, it happened here in Kamloops, but I know I saw the map, and of course, there's multiple residential schools in the province that you or the chief of the grand chief of that province. And I know it affected every First Nation in Canada. And but Derek, I want to give you some time to introduce yourself and share your initial thoughts of our loved ones and our grandparents and parents and cousins that have been through, aunties and uncles that have been through this. And And you could, yeah, just introduce yourself, brother. And thank you very much for being here. And again, thank you very much, because you're going to have you on again. And just that you and I talked, and I said, we can't just, give it a little bit time, but we're going to give as much time as we can to addressing these issues, and hopefully offer up some healing to some of the people that are watching, and give them some ideas on what we could do. So thank you, Derek Nipanek.
Miigwech. I want to say just at the outset, my brother, that I'm very, very honored that you reached out to me to extend me the invitation to be part of this evening's discussion. I reflect on the years that you and I have worked together, and we've always worked from what I believe a spiritual grounding. You're out there on the other side of the mountains, and I'm out here on the northern plains, but there seems to be a connection that's always been there, that's always brought us back to a good place where we could have discussions about what it is that's most important to our families and to our communities, whether it's out there or out here. And there is a connection. The shocker that we've experienced in the last number of days, it draws us all together. And it draws us all together to begin having these discussions that are long overdue. Regardless of the work that was done, with the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, the great effort that the commissioners put in, the great work they put in, the life-changing and society-altering work that they didn't quite get to some of the root discussions that needed to happen. Maybe as a society, we weren't ready yet. Maybe as families, we weren't ready yet. But in the last number of days, I've had family members, my aunts and my uncles, my mom, coming forward and saying there's more stories that have to be heard, and there's more research. There's more looking into this that we have to do. I'm Derek Nipanek. I'm from the Pine Creek First Nation. Out here, everybody knows that Pine Creek had a residential school. It popped up in the late 1800s. There was a great effort on the part of the Catholic Church to try to consolidate the Anishinaabe people at the mouth of the Pine River in what would later become known as Camperville Pine Creek. They traveled about. They went overland. They went over boats, and they visited the communities and the families that were living in the Interlake region, now known as Lake Manitoba. The Duck Bay families, and they strongly encouraged everybody to pack up and move to the mouth of the Pine River, where they're going to establish a Roman Catholic mission, which would include the church and the residential school. They went so far as to try to get, they would actually even bully families to try to get them to relocate to the location, even though families were establishing themselves within their reserves. Whether that be at Duck Bay or whether it be at Scown and Waterhen, people were becoming established. Schools were being built in these locations, but nonetheless, the church came in. The Catholic Church used its influence to get people to move to the new location, and that's really how a lot of families came to live around the Pine Creek area. So, where do I fit in the conversation? Well, I'm the first generation in a long time to not go to residential school. I'll say the first generation in about 100 years to not go. And the outcomes of my family's history in that system are, some of those stories are known and some have yet to be told, as I said before. I recall, a number of years ago when my mom came forward to tell us as her children, the abuse that she experienced in the day school at Pine Creek, but also at the residential school in Dauphin. It too sent a shockwave through me, much as the shockwave that everyone's experiencing right now. I felt it when my mom disclosed to us as her children that she was abused in residential school. What it did was it made me realize that the pain of one is the pain of all, and we all have to acknowledge and recognize that we're suffering and we're hurting from these events. Where do we go from here? Well, we need to have those discussions here in Manitoba. Survivors have gathered at the grounds at the Legislative Assembly, the province of Manitoba. Some of our young warriors have helped out by putting up teepees and brought out wood, and the sacred fire was lit. And there's grandparents there, residential school survivors who are singing songs, and they're welcoming people into the circle from all different faiths. Hundreds of pairs of shoes are on the steps of the Legislative Assembly. And people are using this opportunity to come out and make their tobacco offerings, right? Because as we know, we can take tobacco and offer to the sacred fire, and we can ask for the strength to be able to make it through these difficult times. Ask for the strength to find clarity of purpose in what we're supposed to do and what our contribution is to the healing of our people out here. I'm so grateful that we have such strong ceremony people here in the center, what I call the center fire of Turtle Island, Treaty 1 territory, because they come out and they take the leadership. It's not about the politics out here. At times like this, it's about the spiritual and the ceremony leaders coming forward and helping us find a pathway forward. You know, and there is a reckoning that's on the horizon. You know, and apologies aren't gonna make the difference here. You know, we've heard the apologies already. You know, one of the best ways I've ever heard it explained when it comes to apologies is our friend Leonard Sumner from the Manitoba Interlake. He did a song that he sings, and he said, I know you're sorry. You know, and the song repeats, I've heard your apology. I know you're sorry. You know, so what next? Well, the reckoning of all of this has to surface. And we have to find a way to have these discussions, as difficult as they're going to be. As difficult as they're going to be, we're going to have these discussions. And you know, I pray that we're going to be strong enough to be kind to one another and to be loving in the paths ahead, because we are certainly facing a difficult discussion. You know, and it's all happening in the context of this pandemic, the pandemic that's taken so many of our loved ones. We've all experienced loss in our families and in our communities. Even today, lost 2 family members today. You know, and I think it's all interconnected and all related to what we've been experiencing collectively. So, Ruben, you know, this brings us together, you know, in a good way. You know, I recognize your chieftainship in ceremony as a Sundance chief. I too, I have been to the Sundance and I've done my years. You know, I try and keep a good home here, and try and follow a good path so that I can stay true to what I have to say, and be a good spokesperson for my family. That's all I can really do, and that's all I can really offer. So that's kind of where I think things are at. We, as I said, we do have a residential school history in my community back home in Pine Creek. I'm actually running for chief after taking a number of years off. After I was finished Grand Chief, I took a number of years off. I took the last, since 2017, I've been kind of on the political sideline, I guess, you know, doing the best I can outside of politics to make positive contributions. And, you know, I've made some pretty good big steps, I think, along the way towards bringing some important projects forward for some of our communities. But, you know, I go back to the issue of leadership, back to the issue of helping out at the community level as a SCABE, you know, and for us that means servant or a helper. And I know that oftentimes we use the English word chief, and we think of it in that context, but I don't think of it in that context. I think there's unfinished work that has to be done as a helper of the community, and this is suddenly rising, you know, front and center. Is how do we deal with the stories that remain untold, some of the stories that have gone, you know, to the grave with some of our elders who kept them and didn't voice them, you know. How do we deal with that? Because these stories are coming forward, and there are stories about unmarked graves, even in Pine Creek, around the old residential school site and the church site. And what is the community going to do to address some of these issues? How do we protect, you know, the safety and the security of the people who want to speak, but they don't want to be identified, but they want to share what they know? Because, you know, our elders and our survivors from the residential school system, they deserve to be protected. They deserve, you know, their confidence to be protected. Maybe they don't want to have their story published. You know, maybe they want to just share it and get it out because they've been holding on to it so long, and then they want to go quietly back to their quiet life. How do we create that structure so that people's privacy can be maintained throughout this process? These are all questions that have yet to be answered, but they are questions that are going to turn into tasks that we are going to have to perform. And You know, it's going to be a difficult process, but we will do it. We will do it, Ruben. That's the commitment.
Yeah, I think of, that's beautifully said, and I agree. You know, I just want to share a quick story about my grandfather, Chief Dan George. He went to residential school, you know, and one thing he would say is when we lived in our longhouses, this is a community longhouse. And if every child was taken care of to the extreme, because you have everyone in the longhouse, and you know, if the parents go away, you have the aunts and uncles and grandparents watching the baby. You know, if they went on hunting trip or fishing or whatever they, you know, or to visit other villages or whatever it might be, there's always going to be somebody there that would look after the kids. And he said we'd have our whole family, aunties and uncles, everybody living in the longhouse. And he goes, there's such a disconnect in the culture that we live in today. And he said, these buildings here, he said, they hold 3,000 people. And the only thing that's separating you from the person next to you is 6 inches, which is the wall. And you never get to know that person. He goes, that's a shame. So I imagine him growing up the way he did in that longhouse. Then he went to residential school. 10 years or however how long it was. And my Auntie Lee Miracle told me this. She's a beautiful writer, multiple bestsellers. And she said that when my grandfather came out, he started leaving the St. Paul's residential school and started walking along the inlet. And in a boat, it takes probably about an hour to get to the mouth of the river in this inlet. And he walked and walked and walked, and he couldn't find the longhouse. It wasn't there. Everyone was gone. And just when he's walking back and is getting tired and getting hungry, he started getting closer to Vancouver. And his grandma came out and said, hey, we're here, son. We're here. And he's turned and he said, where's our home? He goes, this is our home. And he goes, no, that's the white person's house. Where's our home? And he goes, we live here now. We have to live here now. So thinking his coming back to what I think is paradise. If you put a monetary value on how we lived back at his time, was food. We had apple orchards, cherry orchards. We had abundance of farming. We had, the tide went out, the table was for sure. So when I was a kid, clams and Dungeness crab for everybody, Derek, everybody in my community. Sometimes we had 50, 70 people out on the water, collecting Dungeness crab and clam and salmon. Every creek, river, and stream when I was a kid had salmon. Now it's gone. I couldn't imagine the abundance when he was young, and it had so much leisure time that, you know, they made a hammer and they put beautiful designs on it. It's perfectly symmetrical, made out of stone. These things are made out of stone, Derek, and they put designs on it. You trade 7 canoes for that hammer, and even the canoes had art on it. So that was leisure time. Because it didn't have to be like that. It was leisure time to pray, leisure time to connect with one another, to share stories and to share songs, to share our philosophies of life, to share about the stars and what they mean and directions and how to find where you're always going to need to be, the tides of the water, when's the best time to travel, when's, you know, sailing, all that stuff. They figured it all out. Medical, the medicinal plants. They still tell me, I'm still learning every time. There's a relation of mine, Cease Weiss. You know, I said, well, how far do we have to go for you to teach me on medicinal plants? And we stepped outside my mom's door and she goes, right here, here, and here, here. And she explained all these plants. And they said, we had things for everything. Our medical practice, second to none. 17 different types of potatoes. It's just, so you know, he that paradise, what I think it would be, he left and went to residential school thinking he's coming back to that. And then everything changed. Everything changed. And you know, here's the story that my aunties and uncles told me, that when he's doing Little Big Man, he rode up to the village and Dustin Hoffman was going to say to him, he said, grandfather, because the whole village was killed. Everyone was killed, dead. And they're lying down and they pulled up and they're like, he goes, why, grandfather, why did he do this? And he goes, because white man's crazy. And so they pulled up and Dustin Hoffman said, why, grandfather, why did they do this? And my grandfather couldn't speak. he started to cry. He goes, I remember this. I seen this. I know this happened. I remember when I was little. And so it's the tragedy that these things have happened. And it's a bit of a tragedy that we haven't been able to tell the stories because of the hurt, the for real hurt. And you said it and you alluded to it, that some can't talk about it. Like I said, my Uncle Sam and my mom taught me more than anyone else about the horrible things that have happened in the residential schools. But when they do, we do it in ceremony, Derek. And my mom, she'll talk about it, and we'll do ceremony immediately to make sure she's okay. My Uncle Sam too. They both come to sweats all the time in our West Coast ceremonies as well, and they're able to talk about these things and remember them and some really can't yet. But we, like, you're right, we have to find a way to create that space, because there's a history there that we need to look at and help people to understand why we are 40% of the homeless population, why we're 40% of the jail population, why we're 50% of school dropout, and start to change even that. All those beautiful things that I talked about in Paradise for my people, for my grandfather, of how we live Paradise, and the stars and the farms that we created, and all this that we had. We're much more than hunter and gatherers of what history says. And it's a fact known that studies show that when Native kids start taking social studies, their grades go down because it's degrading. We're much more than that. If you look at the democracy of how it's created in Canada, United States, look at the Iroquois Confederacy. The medical practice, 65% of anything prescribed as antibiotic was created out of the Americas, out of our plants. Like all these things, and those are the things that we need to teach our kids, and also incorporate the healing. And you know this as well as I do, brother, that, you know, in ceremony, when people cry, we say blessed tears, blessed beautiful tears. And when they cry, and I literally could feel it lifting off them. It's sad that they're crying, and I have empathy, but I feel good because they're releasing. But at the same time, we have to replace that void that's releasing away from them with something beautiful. And that's our family, our regalia, our smudge, our sweats, our longhouses, our songs, our drums, our rattles, all those good things that we use to help to amplify our prayer and to heal. And that's what I hope. That's what we've been doing with my family. And that's what I hope that will be incorporated into healing. And get this, Derek, we're inclusive. We have to be inclusive. My family's inclusive in prayer. My sweat lodge is open. Anybody. You know, we're 65% Native probably, but it's open. In our healing process, Canada needs to heal. You know, we have to recognize that we carry a spirit, and that's one thing that they didn't break with the First Nations and those children, because those children grew up like my father and the great leaders that you had. They grew up and remembered our traditional and cultural ways and handed them down to you and I. And they're strong that way, and we have to be strong and carry the spirit like that. But yeah, I'm gonna hand it back to you, Derek, and then let's talk a little bit more.
There's so many teachings that I remember as you've been speaking, and so many things that I wanted to say, you know, and we've often heard over the years as we grew into men that you know, you're not going to remember everything that the elders are going to teach you, but the teachings will come through at the right time when they need to be heard. And you know, it is in the safety of ceremony where I've heard some of the most difficult histories of some of the elders that have taught me along the way. And it is within the safety of ceremony that those stories and those histories will stay until we find the right way to bring them forward. I know that in men's circles that we've had in the community, some of these stories and some of these histories have come forward, and they're so heartbreaking that all the men just sit there and cry. But because we're in the ceremony, it's okay. It's okay to be vulnerable there. And I do honestly believe that it's our ceremonies that are saving the lives of so many of our people today, because we're finding a way to come back from this experience of the pop-up Western culture, we'll call it, that's been created all around us, finding a way back to the ancient ways of our people to find the healing that we need to move forward. I think quite a bit about how we ended up where we are because of my own participation in ceremony has given me the opportunity to reflect upon so many different things, even the issue around religion, and my studies of history and some of the early work that had been done here in the Northern Plains outside of treaty. And I often say the first stone buildings to go up around here were the churches. But right on the heels of those stone buildings that were built here were the jails, because of the duality of certain religions, that duality where you're either good or you're going to be bad. And oftentimes when this society was beginning to shape itself, there were no good Indians. So we all ended up in their jails. I recall reading even some of the old letters from some of the old chiefs around here, asking the agencies and the lieutenant governor, where's our people? Why are you putting them in that building there at Portage la Prairie, for example? They were picking up people and just holding them in the jail cell for no good reason. There no charges, nothing, just holding them there. So I guess they had a reason to be able to pay a prison guard. So that's the kind of society that popped up here, while we were being confined into the reserved lands, and while these institutions were being built, kids were being taken away, this society popped up. And so by the time 1950s 1960s start to roll around, and suddenly the message in the residential school is don't go back to the reserve, go to the city, because that's the only place you're going to survive. Suddenly our people came out of the reserves and out of the schools and started trying to find a way into the urban environments. And as we know, there was nothing there for us. Like these societies, these cities popped up without our participation. And I can say this because I know the history of my family, and I know we lost people along the way. We lost some of our strongest family members because they were the first ones to venture out of the home, out of the reserve, and into the urban centers. And we lost people. And that's the tragic truth for so many of our families, is as they left the reserve hoping to find something more, hoping to find friends, hoping to find kindness, they were met with the exact opposite. And that is where I think we find a lot of the genesis around, the discussions we've had about all the missing people along the way in the last number of decades. So, when I think about the clash of cultures that's present, and our ceremony space, even in the Sundance ceremony, for example, when we go to identify what we're going to give away of ours as part of our giveaway, to give thanks for the drummers and the singers and the other dancers and the chief and the ones who make the Sundance ceremony happen, all the giveaway we do, I always focused on giving away things that I already had, things that I thought were important to me. And I remember a couple of years there, I would just cry. I would just be sobbing to myself because I'd be giving away things that I thought were so important to me. But yet they say you give away those things that you most covet. So I had beautiful artwork, from different parts of the world, masks and carvings. And, as a Grand Chief, you acquire a lot of different little gifts from different places in the world. And you go to different meetings and someone gives you a print, or someone gives you a sculpture, or you give those away in your ceremony, and you don't hold on to those things, because it's a reflection of your ability to humble yourself to the truth of the ceremony. And the things that you give away are what preserve your participation. They preserve your dedication, your commitment to the process, and that runs completely counter to the Western capitalist society that we operate within each and every day, where it's all about accumulation, right? The more I have, the better I feel about myself. So I better have that boat, you know, or I better have that Sea-Doo, or I better have that, you know, that cabin, you know, like these are the things that seem to drive this Western society we live in, which is backwards to what we often are taught and learn in our ceremony space. And I think that's why they tried to stamp out our ceremonies historically. When they brought colonial laws into place, regulations and laws, they tried to outlaw our ceremony because we were practicing the truest essence of what it is to live beautifully amongst one another, to live in peace and harmony and kindness, and to share what we have, to give away our most prized things. Like they didn't understand it, and because they didn't understand it, they used force. They used force of law and the force of government to try to prevent us from doing these things. But here we are today, and we're still able to do these things, and that's part of the beautiful essence of what we maintain and what we continue to hold on to. The beauty of what we have is still there. There's still some bright lights that shine, you know, to allow for us to do these things and to allow for us to pass these teachings on. One more thing I wanted to mention that came to mind when you were talking was the tar sands healing walk that we did for a number of years. I was invited, I believe it was 2014 that I was invited to do the lead pipe for the walk. And what I found was when we went into the teepee to light the pipe, the chief's leadership pipe from here in this center fire territory, what I found was the participation level just astounded me. Everybody that was at the walk found a way to get into the teepee with us. And you know, today obviously that doesn't work. You don't pass around the pipe in a teepee full of people because of, you know, these health restrictions and the pandemic and whatnot. But it was at a beautiful time when we could convene like that. And the leadership pipe was loaded 4 times. Like I had intended to load it once to share it, but when it came back, I found myself doing the ceremony 4 times so that everybody that wanted to touch the pipe or draw from the pipe had the opportunity to. And what really came through during that time was that we have been experiencing a spiritual deprivation, not just within ourselves, but within the broader Canadian social community. All the people from around the world are here to learn and to become part of the deep spirituality, the deep spiritual connections that we've had. They want to experience that too. They want to understand it. They want to be part of it. And I think that that's part of our responsibilities to share that. So when you said that there's 65% Indigenous people going to your sweat, that means 35% are not. But you know, that's what's so important, is that your door is open to allow for other people from families that have come from all over the world to settle there, to learn the spiritual depths of who we are as the original people. Because government didn't want anybody to know, the churches didn't want anybody to know, and now we're talking about that. Now we're talking about what they did to try and stop us. But here we are, we're still able to talk about these things. We're still able to share that pipe and be good to one another, and that means we're winning. Ruben, I think that means we're winning. So I wanted to add that because you reminded me when you were talking about these things. So
yeah, you know, when you bring up the tar sands, actually that's what the elders directed me to do. There's about 20 allies, environmentalists, that really wanted us to work with them. And Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish elders, that we sat down, and some of my teachers and others, Phil Lane, Robert Haney, my mom, and they said, well, you know, if we do this, 2 things, it's gonna be Indigenous led and spirit led through ceremony. And since it's gonna be ceremony, come to ceremony. We're not gonna make you. But it's a good idea to come for about 3 months. And they came for a year. And what they got out of it was community. But what we wanted them to get out of it, and this is it also happened, is they got to see why. You and I both know, and I share this with all my people all the time, and I prayed all over the world, you know, in South America, Central America, Australia, and New Zealand, Europe, and Southeast Asia, and I'm lucky enough to do ceremony with those people, but they all do the same. They use fire, earth, water, and sky. You put any of those 2 elements together, we all know smudge. You get this sage or sweetgrass, cedar, it's earth, and you get the fire represents the sun, and you light it and smoke comes out of it. But with intention, that's spirit. That's a spirit. That's a prayer. And the prayer is so powerful that I say, I pray for the good health, and I do, brother, for you, for your whole life. If I pass for you, that prayer is still going to go, it's still going to continue. That's the power of prayer. And when we use those elements, we start to understand that sage and the sun and everything has a spirit. Everything. My grandfather says, millions of people want to hear me. I just want the grass to hear me again. Everything has spirit. Everything does. And when we start to use those medicines in our ceremonies, they start to see and to understand that those things carry spirit, and we're connected to that spirit. And in some of the sun dances, they say in Lakota, metakiase. All my relations. Here it's Natsamat. One heart, one mind, one prayer, one spirit together, Natsamat. And what they start to understand when they connect to spirit, and this is what we wanted for them, is to understand those spirits are alive and we're part of it. We're part of it, and that's what we're stopping, this destruction of the oneness that we belong to. So it's interesting you brought up the tar sands, but made me think of that. That's what we did. And that's what we got to do again. Some people come to ceremony and they think they had a privileged life. I asked my bro, who is my Scapio, so fireman, for my sweat, and he's a lawyer. And he said, yeah, you could share my story. He said, I'm a lawyer and I'm doing well and I had a privileged life, but I can't connect to spirit. Like, I'm having a hard time. I can't get emotional. And I said, how come? And I said, well, how long has it been since you had ceremony in your life? And he said, my whole life. And I said, is that it? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, did your parents pray? He goes, no. Them that long too? And I said, yeah. And I said, is that it? And he goes, my grandparents? And I said, yeah. And he said, yeah, 3 generations of no prayer. And I said, it's simple. Let's make it simplistic. Uncle Leonard say you have a car and you're driving down the street, and each one of those wheels represents, one wheel's physical, one's mental, one's emotional, one's spiritual. That's your wheel. That's your spiritual wheel of your being. That's your being driving down the street. And if you take that spiritual out, how's that car going to run? How is that wheel going to turn? How are those other 3 wheels going to turn without that one? It's not going to. And it's so evident right now, today. Look at some poor people are starving at the other end of the world, but I feel just as bad for here with the people whose spirits are starving to death. They're for real starving to death. And it's sad. And when it's like that, disconnected of spirit, look at what Trump did. Look what some of the leadership do. Look at Kinder Morgan and what they did. If they have spirit incorporated in their life, they would make the choices like we do about their 7 generations coming. And that's what we work towards, and that's what we want. That's what we hope for, yeah, you just made me think of those. Do you have any thoughts? We provoking each other's thoughts, bro?
Well, it is all tied back to the land, right? And I remember one of my teachers back home, I'd oftentimes get questions, how come you ask that elder to come pray for us? Because he prays too long, they say, and he prays too long. They're like, are we really that bad that he has to pray that long? but he always
talking about me?
No. No, but I remember asking him to come do prayers for us, when we were doing assemblies and having community meetings. And I remember one time he came up just before lunch was to be served, and our agenda went a little bit late into the lunch hour. So people were really, really keen on getting in that buffet lineup and eating. But then he came up and he started praying, and I remember looking out on the crowd, and I just saw angry face because everybody was so hungry. But his message was so important. His message was so important. His message was that, everything we put in our body, we get from the land. So if the land is sick, it means that we're going to be sick too, right? And that connection, that simple connection, needed to be sent as a reminder in prayer each and every time that he prayed for us as a community that was about to eat a feast together. That simple connection. If the land is sick, it means we're going to be sick too, because everything we put in our body comes from the land somehow, some way. And oftentimes we don't seem to pay much attention to that anymore because we're so quick to to try and get that feast started. So there is that connection there, and our all of those elements of our well-being are connected to the land, which is connected to our spirit, which
Yeah.
helps us live, right? So it's all there. It's all there, and it's in ceremony. And one more note here that I wanted to make, that I'd mentioned about politics, and sometimes what has found me speaking in different circles is my politics, and being a chief in the community and then being a grand chief at the assembly. I really do believe that none of those titles matter. I thought they did when I was younger, but I was younger, and please forgive me, I was learning when I was younger about these things. But in time, I realized, that the most important roles we carry are the ones we have at home, to ourselves and to our children, to our partners, to our family. Those are the most important roles we carry. So none of these job titles really matter. And when we think about it in that context, and maybe we can talk about having some work done in a bit of a different way. And the reason I say that is because one of my late teachers, who I was so privileged to sit with for a while, the late Elijah Harper, talked about the need for spiritual reconciliation through what he called spiritual assembly.
Yes.
Never mind the AFN assemblies, or the AMC assemblies where the politicians come together. We need to talk about having more spiritual assemblies where maybe the divergence that we see can actually be mitigated back towards something wholesome, something true, something kind, when we talk about spiritual connection, and I think that's what makes part of this discussion difficult, is that I know a lot of our cultural people who practice ceremony don't like religion, or there's an issue there that remains because of what happened with religion, whether it's Catholic religion or any of the other ones. Until we make that commitment to come back together in a kind way, regardless of how we pray, to find a common ground, for the well-being of our little ones,
Yeah.
we're gonna struggle. And I think that's why we need to have that spiritual assembly. I think that's where some of our answers are going to come from. I don't know how you feel about that, Ruben, but those are kind of my feelings. I only repeat them because I feel like I learned some of those things from some of the smartest people I've ever known, and some of the strongest spiritual people I've ever known have talked about this. So I share that here today too.
No, you know what? I agree, brother. And first off, I'd say, you said it. We're not perfect. You and I. We're saying these beautiful words. We have beautiful teachings, but I tell the viewers, when Derek and I get together, we talk about our hurt and pain and how we could grow and be better human beings, and we even talk about the hurt and pain we inflicted. I'm not a perfect person by far. I'm not even a good example about how to be, but I will move forward with somebody that way, like we do together, to be better. And that's what ceremony is about. Let's move together. Nothing wrong with making good people better. How about that? Let's move forward and do that. And I know that's our discussions that we have with one another, is to how could we make Derek better? How could we make Ruben better? And it's funny because my kids now are they're 24 and 22, and they're like, Dad, what would you tell people? You better do that too. And I said, well, do as I say and not as I do. It doesn't work anymore. They make me accountable. It used to be my elders, now it's my kids. But my grandfather would say, if you're Catholic, Muslim, Buddhist, doesn't matter. Your longhouse, your pipe carrier, potlatch person, doesn't matter. Just be good at it. And if you're good at it, we can pray together. Honorary member of the Jewish faith, honorary member of the Christian faith. He went to Catholic Church, but he also followed our ways. He was Coast Salish, he followed our Longhouse ways. His peers and his friends were some of the more holy people in our Coast Salish ways. And I followed that way, like my late Uncle Len. He prayed like that. And I did too. Had opportunities to pray with leaders of the Muslim, Catholic, Christian, Baha'i, and like I said, I prayed all over the world, in South America, Central America, Australia. I pray. If I'm invited, I'll pray. And Red Cloud, he came to our sweat. And back then in the 90s, he's like huge. He's huge in spirituality. And so when he came the sweat, my brothers wanted to hand him the bucket. I said, Uncle, you pour. And he goes, no, when I go to your house, I'll pray your way. Simple. When you come to my house, we'll pray my way. Simple. And it's all respect. Then again, we go back to those fundamentals. You know, and my Uncle Lee Brown, he says, you know, if you leave ceremony and you're not feeling joyous, something's wrong. Even a flip of energy during a funeral. We even have my son who's a Hayoka, who'll make people laugh in a funeral. And he's recognized that way. My brother, he came and sat beside me in a funeral, and I was like, oh, geez, don't sit beside me. And he goes, why? And I said, because he always get us in trouble. I said, don't you get in trouble? And he starts laughing. He goes, all the time. And the elders in front of him goes, who's those boys laughing? They turned around, they saw it's Damien. They go, oh, it's Damien. And they start laughing too. They know his gift. They know my son's gift. It's accepted in our communities that they bring medicine to help us to laugh, leave feeling joyous. And then ceremony, add those fundamentals of love and respect and honor and dignity and all those things that we're taught. We're taught those, and you know, that's what I want. You know, that's what you want. With these 215 kids, we're talking about ceremony and healing and being inclusive and listening and all those good things. When we go to spirit, you know, when you and I have a problem, I know for a fact in your house you have a section of your house for meditation and pray to find a way. I think we need to, as people who pray across our country, sit down and pray and find that way for healing, because there, rightfully so, there are people angry. You know, survivors are angry, some of them, you know, and some are, it's hurt, you know, but the anger, I pray that it turns to something and it's released, because we could do that with them in a ceremony. And you know, but yeah, I agree with you. I think, you know, my grandfather and my Uncle Ann and my family, they said him being inclusive, and we are. Him, her, she, whatever, doesn't matter. Nationality doesn't matter. Let's pray together. And look at Vancouver is like a template of all of Canada for First Nations. I know a lot of songs. I know Cree songs, Lakota songs, Haida songs, Kwagil songs, and Nuchanoth songs. You know, because they come and they share their medicine. And I ask them to pray. You know, we have the foundation about how we're going to pray. My first teacher's Cree, even though I'm a Lakota Sundance chief, I honor my first teacher who's Cree. And but yeah, I agree with you, brother. I agree. But you know, moving forward, we need to create that space for that hurt and be inclusive and open it. Because what I saw today at the steps of the Vancouver Art Gallery in the biggest, busiest street in Vancouver, Robson Street, I saw a lot of tears, and it wasn't just First Nation people. I saw a lot of tears, and it was many people that were stopping and crying there. And we went there with my brother Curtis Ahanicue, and we sang some songs. Had a lady come and she goes, "Can I sing?" And I said, "For sure, sing and help." And when I did, bro, you know, when there's a release that needs to happen through ceremony, we're standing there and we could feel that sorrow of all those people that didn't know how to pray, that were just general Canadians that wanted to support. And when we sang, it started to release. And so we have to be inclusive and welcome. We need to, it'd be good to welcome support through this with our allies, because I know we do have good allies. Hey, brother.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. And one thing that I think is worth mentioning as well, as a very important piece of this, is that you know, it's the grandmothers who are leading the ceremony. You know, when we look at what's happening here, for example, in Manitoba at the legislative grounds, it's the grandmothers who are sitting around the fire, who are, you know, making the medicines and singing the songs and welcoming people into the circle. And that balance and energy is so important. You know, I've noticed it in the last number of years as well within the ceremony space. There's much more balance that's starting to come back into the ceremony. So oftentimes when we have the pipe being raised, there's now always a water ceremony that's being led by the women. the grandmothers in the circle as well. That balance is being brought back front and center, and it's long overdue. And it brings a different energy. And even in our Sundance, we have that balance that's there. And our chief is really two people. It's Wally and Karen together, and that it's that beautiful bond of the male and the female energy that helps things happen in the right way. And that to me is so important as well. So lots to think about, Ruben, as we move forward in time.
You know what I was thinking of? And one of my friends, Keith Nahaney from Squamish Nation, he brought this up to me yesterday in a ceremony my Uncle Sam George did with the Squamish Nation. My dad's Squamish, and he invited some Tsleil-Waututh, so we went and joined and sang, and then a couple hundred people showed up. But I had a moment to talk with my friend Keith Nahaney, and Bubas, and he was saying, one thing we got to mention and think about is the mothers of those babies, the mothers of those 215 babies. And think if they had other kids and how that would affect it. And like you said it in the beginning of your introduction is it affects the whole community. It takes a whole community to raise a child, but when something horrible happens and one person's pain is all of our pain. But those mothers, we have to remember those mothers, and like you said, the matriarchs are the ones that are it's the same with us. My sisters are so beautiful and so strong, like my mom, and but yeah, I just want to do that, just do a prayer out for those mothers of those babies. How are we doing, Christine?
We're good. I don't have any questions here on Facebook. If anyone has any questions for Derek or Ruben, please go ahead and type them into Facebook. The only question I might have, or I want to add about currently what has been discovered at the Kamloops Residential School is that there's not much of an awareness in the United States as well that the same thing happened here. And I just wanted to kind of touch on that these residential schools happen all over the world. I think the most brutal places were in Canada, the USA, and Australia, but they also occurred in New Zealand, in Asia, in Africa, and Russia, and it happened to the Sami people in Scandinavia as well. So I just kind of wanted to touch in on that, and that, I know you guys were talking about ceremony, and I don't want to change the subject back to the bad subject, but I know that people are needing healing right now, and I really appreciate what both of you guys do for people. I have a lot of gratitude for both of you.
Thank you, Christine. Thank you. Derek, do you want to go
Thank
first?
You. It is well known that wherever colonialism became a policy for around the world, that there was going to be tragedy. There was going to be ways of trying to what I've often called ethnic cleansing in the homelands of our people. And it's true. I've been to different parts of the world, and it's still occurring in some parts of the world. I've been to Africa. I've been to New Zealand. I've been to South America, and these challenges are still there. And it's so important, I think, to try to bring a balance to engaging the issue, and not to take anything away from how we started this discussion and the importance we put on ceremony, but that balance allows us to retreat back to a ceremony space to I think help preserve ourselves within this discussion, because you can get lost in it. And I recall years ago, one of my elders said, you have to be careful with how you receive information, because some information can hurt you. So what can happen is you can suffer an original hurt, okay? That can turn into a sadness, but the sadness can also turn into anger, and anger can sometimes turn into hatred, and hatred can sometimes turn into acts of wickedness against yourself or against other people. Mm-hmm. So you have to recognize that chain of connectivity that can lead you down the wrong path to an outcome that you don't want for yourself or anybody that you care about. You have to be able to engage that original pain, that original hurt in a good way. And that's why ceremony is such a big part of this discussion. It goes hand in hand. So I wanted to make that point as to why this is an important discussion to have.
On our spiritual Zoom last night, I think we're going to broadcast that, Derek, every Monday night with my spiritual family, my Teoshkape. We have our elders come and share teachings. So they just pop in and they share teachings. And I think we're going to share some of those. There's some generic teachings that they want to share. And but in the Zoom was, I asked one of my friends to speak, Zarna. Her dad was friends with Gandhi, one of his students. And she's sharing about the travesties that happened to her people and are happening right now by the church, and it's very hurtful. And I was in France, and for the last United Nations conference, and I got to pray with the Samis and local people that were praying, and it blew me away. An elder just wanted to share with me, and he started to cry, and he had blue eyes, and his hair was all white, and he's from France, and he started crying. He goes, "They took our land, they took our culture, they took our language, and I couldn't practice it. And they put me in a boarding school. They took everything." And I was like, "What?" And I started to hear that from other elders that were at this conference. It was one of my teachers set it up, and he does a lot of international travel, Phil Lane, and he had different people from all over the world that not only suffered, but ended up being spiritual leaders in their communities. And it really blew me away that it is happening. It is happening. And I think maybe that's something that we could look forward to, because I am going to Scotland, Derek, for the climate conference, and it's in November from the 1st to the 12th. One of my friends teaches at the St. Andrews University, and he's going to bring me over to speak at his school. We do work together. Actually, we're writing a book together, and it's already published. We just have to finish it, and we're going to finish it. But I'm going to speak at his school, and then I'm going to stay for the COP conference, and maybe there's some work around that, because Zarna really would like help addressing some of those issues and look at what we've done to heal. And Derek, you talked about it. We say First Nations because we're many different nations. We're many nations, and we have different ways of doing things. But even with the differences, those fundamentals are the same, and we have to pull them together to move forward. And that's what we did here, and that's what we're doing here, and that's what this tragedy is bringing. In the ceremony last night, multiple different nations got up and did their ceremonial songs to give healing to everybody. And that's what's been going on in the last couple of days, is people from many nations coming together. And I think we need to do that with our relation countries that are also suffering, and welcome them. And like we've been talking about, being inclusive. Everybody's welcome. Come in a good way, in a good way. Yeah, those are my thoughts. We got 12 minutes. Derek, and one thing I think of is our next steps, and we talked about them a little bit, and for sure more needs to be done. Pressure needs to be put on the church to initiate healing, genuine good healing, and around anything. Can't be like the government, because this. Derek is going to be a guest on a future show. We decided that we'd talk about this issue and talk about spirit. But I know for a fact that the colonial way that how Canada put our people through residential school, it's still a problem now. In business, it's a problem. It's a problem, the colonial way. In Federal Court of Appeal, some of these things are still problems. Education is still a problem. Health is still a problem. Where everybody lives on in the land in Canada, there are agreements made, and they were simple, and they're not lived up to. Medical, dental, taxation, education, they're not lived up to anymore. But still, there's billions and billions of dollars of resources leaving our lands every day. And Chilcotin decision says something different about that, but they're still stuck in negotiations. The Mi'kmaq just won. They just won. No, they didn't just win. They won a long time ago in Supreme Court, and they're still stuck in negotiations. They're trying to determine with them what is sustainable fishing. And here, scientists, the government, everybody, are scientists and experts, and everybody says they're not going to affect. They're not going to affect it, but they're still stuck in negotiations. New Chanoff just won, and they're back in the negotiations. They just won in court. So this colonial way has to be fixed. And I like what Simon Lucas said in New Chanoff. He said, "We're not asking for anything, just make it fair." And that's a good start. Just make it fair. But yeah, so we need to move forward and come together and take some big steps, because Derek, I know with the work that you do for lands, waters, people, economics, housing, everything, we need to push that a little bit forward and work together, just like how the Spirit's going to bring us together to heal. I think it's time we work together and address this, the housing issues and the water issues and the salmon issues and the hunting issues, all those things.
Absolutely. And when I think about those issues, I always think about them in the context of treaty making, because I know that the pipes were raised on our side of the discussion when treaties were entered into. Some of the old teachings that have made their way into this lifetime were that we did ceremonies through most of the night at some of the treaty negotiations. And if you look at some of the old notes that were done by some of the English-speaking writers at the time, they always complained about how late we were for the negotiations the next day. They said we were sleeping in and we would just show up whenever. Well, the truth is that we were doing ceremonies through the night, whether they be shake tent ceremonies or whether they be other ceremonies that we needed to have to be able to figure out how to navigate this type of discussion. The treaty context, I believe, is now shifting away from some of the ways we used to talk about treaty. For some reason, we were convinced that our treaty was that Indian status card that they give to people from their offices in Gatineau, Quebec. I had made it, I guess, a personal initiative of mine to make sure to remind people that the programs and services that are offered by Canada as a social safety net are not our treaty rights. Our treaty rights are what we negotiate through the political will of our people meeting the political will of the Crown. And that middle ground that we find sometimes is where the treaty exists. Okay, so when I'm talking about the treaty right to hunt, I'm not talking about the ability to go at any time of the year and shoot a moose on the mountain, because that would be breaking my own natural laws that I understand. There's a hunting season, there's a natural hunting season. It may not follow the provincial conservation hunting season, but there is a natural law of when you go out and harvest a moose, for example. It doesn't mean I go at any time of the year. That's not what the treaty means. The treaty means living by your natural law and implementing them and making sure that there's compliance with natural law throughout the process. And we have as much responsibility to uphold that as anybody else does in the treaty relationship. So when the Crown brings, their government agencies forward, they have to abide by the natural laws we understood at a treaty. And that means an ongoing discussion, ongoing understandings need to be built in order for, the next 7 generations to be able to enjoy a beautiful and bountiful harvest on the mountains near my home. My first time taking out my son for the moose hunt this year, he had a moose in the sights, wasn't ready. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, we traveled a little further down trail and we got our moose out of the mountain and we were able to share the meat around the community. And it was a beautiful, beautiful event, and I'm so happy that the moose was there, to share of himself so that we could experience that, so that the young people could have that experience, because that's who we are as an Anishinaabe people. That's who we are in treaty. So much to talk about. So much to talk about in that context with you a little further downstream, my brother.
Yeah, bro, we have 6 minutes, and we have to work together. And as you said, invite our elders, in our matriarchs to help to initiate the healing that is necessary for us to get something out of this awakening that came about from those 215 little children. And like you said, we need to do that, and I hope we could do that soon, as people, as neighbors, as you know, it affected us all, and we all need to pray together, you know, a National Day of Prayer or something. But we need to start moving forward. Is there any message that you want to send out in a prayerful way to our relations? And you got 5 minutes to any message you want to send out to all loved ones that are suffering and might be listening, and some hopeful words.
Well, I think that it's important for everyone to understand and to know that, you know, that the power of spirit travels over the land, over the mountains. There's no physical barrier that can be present to disrupt the power of the traveling spirit. So with the prayers and everything that's emanating from the west, you know, and from the interior, it's those mountains are no barrier. You know, the power of spirit travels over those mountains and it floods out onto the plains for all of us to join, you know, in the sadness of the moment, in the shock of the moment, so that, you know, we can experience this together. We can share in the grief. We can share in the plans going forward to help address these issues, and we can do this together as one. We have so much work that has to be done here as well. The trigger moment has happened, you know, and now we know that there's so much work to do. Already I'm hearing chiefs and communities talking about revisiting some of these old sites where some of these schools were, and where some of these schools are still standing, and initiating, you know, ground search for some of these unmarked graves that are there. And I know that that's going to be an initiative that's going to happen. And I pray and I hope that we're ready for it. I hope that we're ready to find what the truth is. And I hope that those who are responsible for this take responsibility and do the right thing. And you know, not only seek forgiveness from our people, the original people of these lands, but to do something beyond that. And I don't know what that is yet, but there will be something. As I said from the beginning, there is a reckoning on the horizon. I don't know how it looks or what it is, but you know, we have to get ready for it. And you know, all the prayers from here on the northern plains to the families out there on the west, out in the west and in the mountains and out to the coast, because we've got so much work ahead of us. Makes me think of our friend out in Mohawk territory too, sometimes wondering how he's doing out there, our friend Serge.
Yeah, for sure. And you know, we had Pam on too, Pam Palmatier, and you know, we're helping people right across the country and also in the States. You know, you mentioned that in a prayer. I got a call from the kid's mom, who's one of the leaders in the States, and they want to know what they could do to help. And also, this should bring more awareness to what they went through as well. The boarding schools, they call them down there, and bring more awareness to what happened down there. But for sure, prayer and unity is always a key, and that's what helped us. You know, I think of, there's a time period between when we quit going to the Catholic schools and day schools and residential schools and to Tsleil-Waututh. There's a time period of about 10, 15 years that we didn't practice a lot of people, but we always had the earth and the water and the canoes and the forest, and we are always in there. We are always in there, and that's what gave us the healing during those hard times. And of course, we picked up sweat lodge and pipes and our own longhouse ceremonies, and so I hear you, and blessings to all the people that are listening. Unity is so important, prayer so important, healing so important, to listen so important. Really important time to listen to our elders and take care of our elders and cherish our elders. My grandfather said, don't ever go into another person's community and tell them how to be, because what they did to get to this point is good enough. So in a respectful way, in the best way, no disrespect intended in anything Derek and I said. We're just putting out thoughts and prayer. And you know, Derek, you'll come on the show another time, and we both decided that this is a good time to talk about some of the issues that came up around the 215 that we'll never forget. And I hand it over to you, Christine, to end our show in a good way. Thank you very much, Derek. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Miigwech. Miigwech.
Thank you so much, Derek and Ruben, and we will see all of you guys next week on Tuesday at 6 p.m. PST. Thank you.
Thank you.